My name is Davis Frank. I am an Associate Director and Developer Advocate at Pivotal Labs in San Francisco. Thanks for coming today. To let you know a bit about us and me. We're a software consultancy based in San Francisco, but with offices now in LA, Boulder, Denver, New York, Boston, and London. We're known primarily for web and native mobile development, and very much in the Agile Software Development practice space, which is why I'm talking to you today. As for me, I have been here for about 5.5 years, was with a client for a year and change before that, and have worked on client projects up until very recently when I moved into a role where I lead our open source efforts. If any of you have used any of our testing frameworks or tools around the office, thanks, and we appreciate the feedback. I'm also the maintainer of the Jasmine JavaScript testing framework. But I'm here to talk today about our process, what we're known for, and what we would like to help you and your team with, but also about how Pivotal Tracker, which is an application that we wrote, how we use that to model and support an agile development process that we find that is very productive for us and our clients. So it doesn't matter what you call agile development. It could be extreme. Lean is a happy adjective that's been used a lot lately. Thanks to Eric Ries and the Lean Startup movement. But it all goes back to the Agile Manifesto of the mid to late 90s. Our founder was one of the people that was very much involved in the early Agile space with Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham and a gang. But no matter what sort of branch or set of methodologies you may or may not have used or heard used or seen used or read about, everything in that we espouse and work with is all about feedback loops. Waterfall software development, much like this gargantuan cup of coffee, just bear with me for a sec. That cup there will hold about a quart. Seem like a good idea and allow you to handle change and really try to control change actively. But the problem with waterfall more traditional software methodologies is that the feedback loops are so delayed. They're so long from the idea to planning to execution to evaluation that, much like a gargantuan cup of coffee, it seems like a good idea at the time, but once you actually are sort of in it, you realize that what you wanted out of that experience is not exactly ideal. Whether it's cold coffee or late shipping software, it's not about, it's not giving you what you set out to do. And if you're a coffee snob, or you're looking at this from a different angle, you could make the argument that a lot of smaller feedback loops are actually a lot better for your project. A little bit of definition, a little bit of planning, a little bit of execution, a little bit of evaluation allows you to take a bunch of different paths. And it can be argued, and I see this every day on the projects that we work on, is that it actually gets you closer to a desired result. And you really got to get in there and do things, right? You've got to define a little bit, slice your project up, define a little bit, develop a little bit, ship a little bit. And then what you find is that you can get a lot done that way. Any one of these small steps, or even 4 or 5 of them all together, might seem sort of trivial or ridiculous or not worth talking about, but strung together, you really can do amazing things and make your clients happy and make your management happy and make your developers happy. And there aren't going to be successes everywhere along the way, right? You'll always run into failures, but when those failures happen, you're usually, they're a little bit less dire, less impactful, and easier to recover from in order to make the next step or steps closer to your desired result. And often when I talk about this, or when you read about this approach, is your immediate reaction is, wow, there's no way that this can work for software. Software is this big, important, complex thing that has to be tamed. And I'm here to tell you otherwise, that we've built a very successful company and grown to a large consultancy, and have worked on hundreds of projects over the years and trained thousands of developers to work this way. And in general, we get high quality, high desired results, and in general, a high level of happiness among product teams all over, management, design, and development. And it really is a way that can lead. It's not the only way by any means, but it's a way that we find that's very effective and very easy to teach. So let's talk a bit about process and what we do and why and how this relates to feedback and keeping your feedback loops tight. We're definitely big fans of test-driven development and continuous integration. We do write by default failing tests, code to prove that we want the results that we want, whether it's a small object or a module or a feature, and we only write the code necessary to make that test pass, and then we run that test to make it green. We refactor the code, get rid of cruft, come up with alternate ways that are easier to maintain over time, and keep those tests green, and build a large test suite over time, providing feedback all day long in little tiny steps from, doesn't matter whether it's outside in or inside out, but little tiny steps building more and more code that just covers the implementation that we need and the desired results that we need. And anytime any of those tests is broken, we jump right back in and find out, say, especially if a test was broken and code you wrote an hour ago or a day ago or a month ago or a year ago, keeping all those things green, knowing that the code still works before you check it in. And then once the check-in happens, the continuous integration server will check that code out and run the entire suite again, usually in an environment, especially for web projects, like most of you Spring developers work with, in an environment closer to production, to avoid what I like to call the works on my machine problem, and really know that the entire suite is green and the product is in good shape before we go on to the next chunk of work. And this, Agile doesn't prevent bugs, and test-driven development doesn't prevent bugs, but it certainly prevents regression, which means you're finding out about your code all the time. And if you regress, usually what happens is you have discovered a test case that you don't actually have embodied in your test suite. All this keeps the feedback going very quickly among a development team over the course of the day. So you can make small corrections, whether it's just keeping your suite green or making the next small bit of functionality added to your project. We're pair programmers by default. If you came to any of our locations, you would see a raft of pairing stations with one computer, two monitors, two keyboards and mice, and two people talking through problems and working together to write these tests and get them passing. And this really does keep the quality high, because you're not only getting feedback on ideas when they pop into your head when you're talking through them with your pair, but you're also getting immediate code review, getting feedback on coding style, on object design style, on impact across the code base from the get-go, right? You're in there all the time getting that feedback one-on-one, which is great for keeping your code quality high and keeping the skill development going across your teams. Strong advocates of shared ownership. We don't allow code silos on our project, not just because of pairing, but say you don't have one person that sits over in the corner and the only thing that person does is the ORM, maybe for your project or some custom module that sits on top of that. And it's not to say that expertise doesn't arise. I'm known as a JavaScript guy, and I work when I work on client projects. I might be pairing with a database guy, and I'm going to learn about the SQL. I'm going to learn about the ORM, and he's going to learn about JavaScript and how to test in JavaScript. And we spread the knowledge around, which means that people can do things like go on vacation, or say have a kid, or deal with a sick relative, or get hired away by a competitor. All of these things happen all the time. And if you have shared ownership, you don't suddenly increase your feedback loop time just because someone isn't available. And anybody can get in there and fix any problem, whether it's a build failure, a test suite failure, or adding a new feature in some other part of the code that they don't necessarily know that well. So this is as much an insurance policy on your product team and on your development team as it is keeping those feedback loops super, super tight. We definitely believe that as a product team, you should be developing only the things that the business needs. This helps a lot. The stereotype from the last couple of slides I've shown you here. We don't have a lot of, in fact, we have no developers that sit in the corner with the lights off at 3 a.m. with headphones coding away on what they want to code on. And as a result, the code that they do work on, which stuff ships right away. And as a developer, you get feedback right away that, hey, whether you did something actually helped the business. And your business isn't spending time waiting for some big masterful library to get built by the one guy that understands some esoteric part of the code. We've already talked about shared ownership. But instead, you're employing the whole team to do the right thing for the business so that you can keep working this way and keep the team together and keep moving down the road, whatever that road is for your product. But building for the business means that you're getting code out, or rather you're not wasting time or waiting for something large to get built before something ships. We definitely believe in lots of small plans. The closer in time you are, the better fidelity your plan needs to have, which means your day is really well structured out. Your week is pretty well structured out, and maybe week 2 and 3 out from now are reasonably well planned, but not down to certainly not down to the minute of the hour, but kept at this granularity of story so that as something random happens, like an announcement from a competitor or a sudden new competitor, or data in from the field about whether something is working as a new feature or not, allows you to sort of scrub any plan that you have because you haven't spent months and weeks defining your development plan out for the next 2 or 3 years. Instead, you're looking just enough past the horizon as a product team in order to see what needs to get done right now. But as soon as you need to react and deal with change, you're not wasting a lot of effort on a plan that never gets realized, right? You're getting feedback right away about those. Definitely a fan of shipping all the time, getting that feedback about your product so you can improve it based on real world usage. We push our clients to, whenever there is a green build out of the CI environment, to put out a release. Maybe that's a release just to a staging environment in a web case, or dumping something on test flight, or to beta users on maybe the Google Play Store. But the idea is, if you're shipping to, and we'll talk about story workflow as I get into Tracker in a few minutes, getting your product in front of users early and often means that you can tell the team, okay, that isn't exactly how I wanted it to work, or worst case, it works exactly as the business intended, but it turns out it doesn't connect with users. You find that out now. You don't find that out 18 months from now. You don't find that out 2 years from now. It's one of the grandest things of web and mobile, in my opinion. You don't have to wait till a shrink-wrap piece of software winds up on a shelf at a store before we get feedback. We can get it, days into development if need be. And lastly, retrospectives. We've talked a lot about product and code up until this point, but what about your team? What about your process? Sitting down at the end of the week with a team and celebrating your victories. What's working really, really well? What are we worried about? What things are working, we think, but there's some worrisome aspects to them, and what's definitely not working? What's preventing us from succeeding? If you have these meetings, and with our clients, we have them at least biweekly, if not weekly. We want to have those meetings and talk about that test suite time is too long, or the request, while the functionality is correct, the performance isn't right enough for the product to do what we want, there's too much noise or not enough noise, or the snacks are bad. Whatever it takes to keep the team happy and producing, having those discussions and making sure you get a lot of high-fiving in there for what is working means that you are looking at your process and your people as much as you are your code and your product. And Pivotal Labs is a company that started from something that is probably very canonical with the Kent Beck's first edition white book about extreme programming, and we have iterated over, as I said, hundreds of projects over the years. We had over 100 projects just last year alone to refine our process and make it better for us and for our clients, and adapt, right? We have a place in this process what we start with, but every client is slightly different, and I'm sure your team is too. So measuring this every week is a great way to keep transparency about what's working and what's not, and allowing you to improve and refine how you work so that next week, as you refine your plan even more, you can execute even better. So this is where Pivotal Tracker comes in. And long before I got here, this was a company that was running with story cards and whiteboards on wheels and lots of pieces of paper tacked to the walls, and war rooms and whatnot. And our process over time is really refined, and we reached a point in late 2005, early 2006, where we said, we think we know what we need from a software project management tool. So let's write one. And we used it and iterated on it and built it the same way that the previous slides have talked about, to the point where we had something that was usable day to day for our clients, and our clients would continue to use it after they left. And sometimes some of the startups we worked with would implode, and the members of the team would explode out into other companies, and they'd contact us to get accounts back on Tracker again for their new company, and or their new location where they were working. And we realized that we had a real product here. So and I'm going to walk you through a bunch of the features for the rest of the time here, but really this is a software management tool that embodies the process that we teach you when you come in the door here, and one that supports all the feedback, keeping the feedback loops tight and keeping the communication going with between a product team, a product management team, and a development team. And it does everything that you would expect, right? You're not going to manage a project without being able to prioritize work and organize it in such a way that you can figure out when things are going to ship. And as a product manager, you certainly want to be able to predict it and predict releases and you want to make sure that you're factoring in the historical performance of a team. So these are the nouns that we'll be talking about for the tracker uses, right? Which is you're going to be managing a backlog of stories sliced up into iterations, organized to help you predict releases based on velocity, based on how much work the team is able to get done in a given week. And it's meant as a fairly simple tool that enables continuous communication among a dev team, right? You want to be able to have openness and transparency about what a product team needs, and openness and transparency about the progress that the development team is making towards those deadlines and towards getting that work done. The stories that I show you here, we always talk about that this is not meant to replace communication, but rather enhance it and be transparent about it. Every one of the stories in a tracker backlog is meant as a placeholder for a conversation. It might be one that's already happened because the product and design and development have had really good discussions about how something needs to act and how a feature should work. But the next step after that is for execution to happen, right? So the conversation has either already happened, there's enough definition to get started, or it's meant as a reminder there to say, hey, we need a lot more details in order to get started and surface that so that the team can be productive. So let's take a look. This is a tracker backlog. This is a bit of a toy backlog for an app that a coworker and I have said for 3 years that we're going to write to manage a Super Bowl square pool, hence the awful name. But let's talk a little bit about what you see here. You're seeing on the left side of the screen a pane that's the backlog. These are all of the prioritized stories that have been written and built and then prioritized by a pretend product manager. And what you're seeing here is a couple of early things here. These are chores. We'll talk about story styles in a second. Stars are all features. The blue bars are here for estimation, right? 1, 2, and 3 points. The stories with start buttons are ones that have been estimated, so they can be worked on. Our blue stripe here is an MVP release marker. It's blue at the moment, which is good. We'll make it red in a little bit and explain how that works. And then down here we have a set of other stories that haven't yet been estimated. And this black bar is telling us that we have a September 10th, next Tuesday, deadline for this MVP. The right-hand side is the icebox. This is stories that have yet to be prioritized. So let's make a new story, which is I want the user to see a snazzy landing page at our URL. And that's a feature, that's new functionality. I can add some stuff in here. I'm the requester, there I am. I can have more description, labels, which are tags. They're tags in this system, we'll talk about those. I could break these out in tasks, not as a product manager, but as a development team later. And then there's a comment thread for this. And I'm a product manager at the moment, so I can't estimate this, but I can define it, and I'm going to drag it to prioritize it. And you'll see the black bar here. This is just, hey, let's drag it over and land. So the icebox here can be a good placeholder for a product manager to put a whole bunch of ideas. There could be dozens of stories in here. Big ice boxes can get hard to manage, but it's a good placeholder for product ideas that have yet to be prioritized or need to be worked on. And I can drag this over right now. And my engineering team has told me, hey, that's all well and good that you want to have a landing page of the URL, but until we have a source code repository, until we've set up Heroku for deployment, there's no way that we can do that story. So it's all great that you think that has the highest business value, so you've dragged it to the top. But we're going to tell you that technically it doesn't make sense, and I'll accept that from this team for now because I trust them, and I'm going to move this down. And they're going to now tell me they're going to prioritize it at 2 points. And what you'll see there is that the September 9th for next Monday, that got pulled in a little bit because we pushed this specific grid square story, this 3-point complex story, down below the September 9th. One other thing you'll end up noticing here is that we haven't done any points yet, haven't completed any points for this week. Our velocity is 10, which means we should be able to do 10 points a week, which is where these gray line slicings have been. But that's because it's Labor Day here, and we didn't work Monday. So I set that to 80% capacity for the current week. But I'll switch it back to, you can see when I moved it back up to 100, we went from 7 points to 10. I'll make this back to 80 for the rest of the demo. You can see where make that reflect the way the real calendar here in the U.S. So that's quick run through of our backlog. Let's talk about the types of stories we have. We have features, which, as I talked about earlier, and you know, when talking about user stories, these are the things that have verifiable business value. These are the things that, as a product manager, I can say yes. That is something that is now correct because we've had the discussion because the team has implemented it. And we tend to phrase these more in a conversational style and with providing justification, right? So it's not just that I want a shopping cart, right? Shopping cart is a lousy story title. But having the details that as a shopper, I can add an item to my shopping cart so I can purchase it later, that gives me enough context as a developer, when I put my developer hat on, that when that story is delivered and is up there for me to accept as a product manager or as a developer, I know what I'm trying to connect and why this story exists. And then as a product manager later, I can accept it because I know what's going on. Chores, that was back to these chores here, these first two at the top. These are needed, they're required. These usually come from developers. But they're not verifiable business value, right? Yes, you could have a meta discussion and say that, hey, an app that doesn't have source control isn't worth entrusting your product to. But a customer doesn't know that your team is using GitHub for source control, or probably even what source control is, depending on the product. But as a product manager, you tell me you need a repo to put your code in to get your job done. I'll let you prioritize that earlier, but I'm not going to be able to accept it as a product manager. Those are chores. And then a bug is sort of anything else. It's not, a story that's a feature that's incomplete for some reason because something got missed. That's not a bug. That's usually miscommunication, and we'll reject the story for that. A bug is usually for something that, hey, something introduced a defect, or for something that was already accepted. This is a good razor for trying to decide, canonical bug versus feature jokes aside, if you categorize bugs this way, it tends to make your flow a little bit simpler. So that's how we think of features, bugs, and chores. When you create a story, you'll see here, just a drop down for those three. Releases are a fourth. It's really less of a story and more of a marker, but it's still the type of thing you can create here. So very easy enough a bug or a chore is just like anything else. If I wanted to say our landing page, we're having a problem maybe seeing the custom font on Firefox, roll with me that, say, this landing page story had already been accepted, and we'll talk about acceptance in a second. I can just drag this just like anything else, take it out of the icebox, and put it right here. Now, maybe I don't care about Firefox users until after our MVP, because I know that our MVP is only going out to 40 users who are all using Chrome, so I don't care about Firefox, so I can deprioritize that bug if I want. Again, very easy to do. Just drag and drop, and now the product manager is communicating that priority, the business priority, to the developers. Estimation Let's see. Let's do the life of the story next. Life of the story. So chores, any story that has a start button can be started. And we don't let you start an unestimated story for obvious reasons. But if I start, say, this repo setup story and I finish it as a developer, notice it goes green right away. This story, chores are auto-accepted. This gets back to getting back to there not being business value. As a product manager, I'm not going to care or validate whether the repo is set up. And maybe the same thing for Heroku for our deployment targets. But if this first story here is, hey, I want to see the snazzy landing page, as a developer, this is now the next story at the top of the backlog. So I'm going to start it. I'm going to code it. I'm going to write some tests. I'm going to get them passing. And then I'm going to finish it. And finishing means, almost always, that it's been committed to source control. Continuous integration is going to get run on it, et cetera, et cetera. And at some point, we'll want to deploy that to some sort of staging environment, some place where a product manager can accept it. Well, maybe we'll reject it first. I could say something like, wasn't snazzy enough, and reject the story. And now it's in a restart state, and it's back at the top of the backlog again. And it can be reprioritized. Actually, sorry, it can't, can it? Nope, see, it's not going to let me reprioritize it. That's demo flub. Anyway, it's now, because it's at the top of the backlog, it stays at the top of the backlog because we thought we were done. It's not. We should revisit it. And so as a development team, I can then restart that story, finish it, deliver it, and then maybe it's good enough now. And now we're seeing that because that story has been accepted, those 2 points, we're actually getting credit for those 2 points for this iteration. Well, you don't get credit until until product accepts it. So we talked about backlog and position as priority. Let's talk about velocity and iterations. The best, cheapest predictor of today's weather is what was yesterday's, and we definitely believe that here at with Tracker as well, because what you're seeing here is Tracker is taking an average of the last 3 weeks. This product is the first week, so we use the default of 10 points to get to predict where this iteration slicing is here. When does the second week start from a story perspective? And we already talked about the prediction factor, but you can muck with the velocity. Now, this is just my view. If you were also on this project, your view would be separate. We don't let you override velocity because we want velocity to be emergent from actual work. But what you'll see here is that I cranked the velocity down to 3. Tracker's now split this up into way more iterations than before. And my release marker's gone red. And it's gone red because this release marker has, as you can see this black bar up here, a deadline of September 10th or a desired release date of September 10th. And it's currently red because if our team's only getting 3 points done a week, we're certainly not going to meet that September 10th date. Let's crank this up to 5. Make this a little more doable here. Well, it's still, if I added some people, maybe crank my velocity up, but I can start dropping scope as a product manager, right? I can start dragging these stories down, or maybe drastically move my marker up to make it blue again and say, okay, I'm only going to get up to this displaying the grid story if that date is correct. But now I know this, right? I've got the information. It's been surfaced. And it's up to the PM to say, okay, I can move the date, or I can decrease scope, or if we think it might work, we could take the risk of adding more people into the mix. That would be certainly the third choice, or at least it might help our velocity long term, but maybe not in the short term. But again, we're surfacing it, we're making it transparent. So I'm going to move my velocity back and move my release marker down to the estimated stories. the key about estimation is volatility. So we as humans, there's plenty of actual real work done in this field to tell us that we're lousy at absolute estimation, but we're actually pretty good at relative estimation. Tracker has a couple of different point scales, the 1, 2, 3 that you're seeing here, or a Fibonacci, or even points, whatever. It doesn't matter what you use. You just pick something based on what the team guesses, right? And what happens is over the life of the project, definitely within the first 3 or 4 weeks, a team working together will figure out about how big a 1-point story is, about how big a 2-point story is. And when the team goes through a group exercise of estimation, you'll see people throwing points is a term that people used, sort of in a Rochambeau kind of style of how many points, and there are arguments back and forth. It's like, I think it's a 2, I think it's a 3, and you get some kind of consensus based on that. And that starts to get to the point where estimations are fairly consistent given the same development team, which means that you'll settle into a pretty good velocity, or at least a predictable velocity of number of points a week that are getting done. And then you can start looking out for volatility, because it's not whether you're getting 10 points done or 12 points done. It's whether you're roughly getting 12 to 15 points done a week, and suddenly you have a week where you only got 4 done. Or maybe you got a week where suddenly 20 was done. And what does that tell you? The optimist might say, well, we're going to get 20 points done every day, every week now. But maybe, a little more introspection will make you realize, well, that was the week that suddenly we found a library that implemented half of the functionality we needed for these 6 important stories. So we estimated them based on not knowing or not having this library, and it turns out that we got more done than those stories turned to be easier. Or maybe you may have noticed that bugs and chores don't have points. Maybe we suddenly have a lot of bugs in the field, and we're having to fix those, and so we can go back and look at accepted stories and see what was done over those weeks where we were slower. So it's volatility you want to look out for, and it's a good thing to bring up in retrospectives that, hey, the velocity had a huge dip this week, or had a huge spike. Why did that happen? And how can we get our velocity back to a more predictable state? Release markers, we just played with that a little bit, so I've gone a little out of order on it. But again, the point of the release marker is to put a line in the backlog to say, at this point, I want to release software to the public and get customers playing with this again. And data is optional and helpful for all those reasons that I talked about. And again, it's communicating the desire of not just the priority of the business features and the business value in the backlog, but here's a point where we want to show all this to the customer. Labels. So you'll notice maybe some of this green text here. Needs discussion is a great label that we put on stories a lot of the time. You'll see them here. They're just typed in. And you can see the ones that we've used on the project before. And the point of a label is really, it's a tag, but it's really meant for searching. So needs discussion is a great one. When you click on a label, you get a new pane like this with all the stories that match it in the backlog and forward. And this is to say, we use needs discussion of saying, okay, usually, hey, a PM steps out for, maybe they're gone for a day, maybe they're back at headquarters, or maybe they're out visiting customers and they're unreachable. This is a way to tag stories, is a great way to tag them to say, oh, hey, here are all the ones we need to talk to the PM about, and usually we resolve those in the next morning. Or a more important one, say, if we looked at blocked, these are stories, and it's not fair here that I've not removed these blocked labels since I've completed them, but maybe we wanted to have a discussion or couldn't finish a discussion until we got some external validation. So this team, as you can see here, has decided to use GitHub for source control, so we can unblock that story. But again, these are ways for grouping like-minded things, the way that any tag would. And it's just got nice little shortcode syntax up here in the search. But we use labels all the time around here for those searching and grouping. Epics are big stories, and it's a way to look at, and there's an epics pane, I created this one earlier called splash screen. So if I go and add, notice that this is a purple, it says linked label. I could go take the two stories that we talked about with the splash page earlier, and I can link all these together. Now they get the purple label of splash screen, and they're associated with this epic. I can go look at those stories. Now this is great. As I get rid of this multi-select UI, these are grouped the way a label would, but it gives us a place to put data on this label, right? Instead of just grouping stories, it's grouping a story with activity. So I can say, see attached mockups, and then there's some bottom functionality here I didn't mention before, but I could actually upload, if I wanted, the mocks for the splash screen or the landing page, and we could choose to have discussions just about this chunk of functionality. And then as a product manager, you get this little progress bar. You can see how many stories in that epic have been accepted, are still in progress, are still in the icebox, or not. And we even give you a little rough estimate about when we think, in which iteration that will be completed. We use these for a bunch of different things. This is a feature that has only been around for about a year or so, maybe a year and a half. It can be done for tracks, groups of functionality like the landing page splash screen that I just discussed, release themes or themes that go through several stories over time. One that I found that was very effective on a project where we had so many people that we were trying to decide, we could slice things into small stories for acceptance, but we definitely wanted to have large chunks of functionality going out at once. That's what the customer desired. And so we chunked this up in a way that we would ship an epic would all go to production at the same time or have their feature flags turned on at the same time. Other neat things, these are things that often come up when people ask about Tracker. We've got some new UI coming soon that more amenable to larger screens and projector screens for planning meetings and if you're on multiple projects, seeing your work across multiple projects, or if you're a PM that needs to work on multiple projects at once, giving you the tools that you need so that you can have multiple project workspaces and even dragging stories across, and definitely some in-app notifications so that you can see when another team is doing an update or another pair on the other side of the room, or maybe your product manager is reprioritizing or updating stories out in the field or away from the dev team, that you can see that more effectively. So those are all things that we're working on to make Tracker even better. And Tracker itself is built the way that, with all of these principles that we've been talking about this morning. The feedback from customers, the shipping all the time. If you're using Tracker, you may have noticed now that occasionally we'll put a little, hey, Tracker's updated inline little link for you to click that will actually reload all the JavaScript on that page because we've added features or fixed bugs. So we're pushing all the time as well. So everything that we talk about, Pivotal Labs talks about on our blog and webinars like this, any customer visit, we really practice on our own projects. And it gets back to the theme for all this, right, which is trying to show you that it is possible for software to be built with a lot of small feedback loops that truly do result in big progress. And that Tracker is a way to reinforce that desire, that practice in your team. I think that's pretty much it. Encourage you to check us out more. Certainly you can sign up for a free account for Tracker today. It's while it is a paid service, open source projects and academic projects can ask for free accounts, and we'll totally give it to you there. There's a documentation about how to do that. Blabs is our blog where we talk a lot about web development and mobile development, but also a lot of set of process things, and of course our URL. And I put this up here at the top. If you're more interested in how we work and a bit of the Agile Manifesto on the sort of the extreme programming side. The O'Reilly Extreme Programming Pocket Guide is a great short distillation of the Kent Beck White Book, and is something that I always point people to when they are looking for sort of their introduction on the process side. So that's my presentation. Are there any questions out there?
Yeah, so let's see. So for folks that are still on the line, if you have any questions, this is a great time to add them into the Q&A panel, and Davis will address them. One came in noticing that bugs and chores don't have points and don't contribute to velocity. Why is that?
Great question. This one's been a fun, controversial topic over the years. It mostly has to do with the volatility bit that I talked about. So I guess there are two ways to view the backlog, or to view your team's capacity. Whether you're looking at absolute capacity, or are you looking at relative or capacity relative to business value? And we tend to fall on the, and Tracker by default falls onto the, hey, if you have a lot of chores or a lot of bugs, you want that to affect your velocity because that will tell you something, right? The example I mentioned earlier, if you released software out into the wild and you got a flurry of bugs and those bugs got prioritized and you spent a whole bunch of time smashing those bugs, I think we've all been on projects where we've had, bug smashes on Friday afternoon. You want that to show up in your velocity as a negative, right? That's saying that if you've got a lot of bugs, well, why do you have those bugs? Let's force that discussion. And the best way to force that discussion at a project management level is to say, oh, hey, we got less done in terms of velocity last week than we got done in prior weeks. Why is that? Similarly for chores, if you're using refactoring for chores, or maybe you had some server maintenance or things that you needed to get done that needed full attention from the dev team, but you had to put features on hold and you wanted to make that trade-off explicit. Well, let's let that show up in the velocity. And again, with Tracker doing an average of 3 weeks, that the velocity will return to normal if you're staying on track. There is an option, it's very buried in the preferences panels, to turn on points for bugs and chores. If you want to be the type of team that says you don't care what work is being done, but rather that your team is at capacity all the time, that is an option. I tend to be in the camp of, I trust my team to be at capacity. I'd rather know when something is preventing us from shipping value.
Awesome. Thanks, Davis. Question from Amy Kinney. Why can't I use the @ feature in tasks?
The @ feature in task, was this meant for mentions?
I believe so. It's the @ symbol.
Yeah, so if we're talking about mentions is something, let me show you guys here. Thanks to Twitter and now GitHub doing this, is that you can actually follow stories, and you can find out who's following, and you can actually mention other users with @ I know that is true in comments. If that's not in tasks, that is a fantastic feature request, and I will get that to the team.
Awesome. Craig C. asks, how do you deal with dependencies on outside teams?
Oh, God, that's a great one. Dependencies are hard no matter what. The cop-out answer is pull your teams in. I think the more realistic answer is that within Tracker, we have, it's a great use for epics or labels in general for calling those features out. We've done a pattern, maybe, Craig, maybe this will help. I used a pattern on a lot of projects where when we have an explicit dependency on another team, especially if it's under our control or corporate control versus, say, some library you're using. We've done things where we've split up stories and had a story for implementing functionality with some kind of faked out dependency so that we can prove our own code. And then usually we'll allow that story to be accepted independently. It's usually feature flagged away so that users don't see it until the dependency is met. And then we'll create another story for the dependency and allow that to be accepted separately. So if you imagine, fake implementation of feature foo followed by real integration point once that's happened, and keep those stories, near the top of the backlog with like a blocked or dependent blocked or, blocked by the API team or something like that. We've found is a pretty good pattern to use it. And then, ideally, those issues are coming up by seeing stories like sort of stacked up at the top of the backlog that can't ever be started because they can't be finished, and that those things come up in retrospectives.
Excellent, thanks. Mark's, I'm going to slaughter his last name, so I'm just going to say Mark. Can you reiterate the creation and use of the gray title bars in the backlog? Do the gray bars represent sprints?
We got the sprint word. Okay. So the gray bars, like we see here, are not, Tracker puts those in. And Tracker puts those in based on the current velocity of that it's being calculated, and is based on not splitting a story across an iteration boundary. So, for example, while 80% of 10 is 8, Tracker is saying that this week of September 2nd, we can only get 7 points done. So this 3-pointer down here is the first story for next week. This is so Tracker is doing that date slicing for you. And the only control that you have over that is to either manually increase or decrease, say, the velocity of your team. Again, I'm not setting the velocity for the project. I'm overriding it for my view. So, Mark, if you were looking at this same backlog right now, you would still see velocity 10, even though I've overridden it to 15. Tracker is doing that. You don't have control over it, except to fiddle with it to predict, to help you to predict, what would happen if my velocity was higher, or what would happen with it lower? Would that make the release marker or markers red or blue? In terms of the sprint question, this would be getting into sort of a fine splitting hair. If you're following Scrum to the letter of the law, right, teams are committing to an amount of work done in a sprint, versus the more XP style, which is more what Pivotal advocates, which is let's look at this every week and let's see how well we're doing, and let's let the velocity predict what we're going to get done versus the commit idea. If you're a sprint team that really, really values commits, there is a commit mode. You can turn commit mode on that works much more the way that standard Scrum would work. The good news is it's just a checkbox. So I would encourage you that to give the commit mode a try, and then maybe tease yourself and try out the more fluid style that's the default. When you're in that mode, what you'll see is loosely, I guess really what I've been talking about is Pivotal Tracker assumes week-long sprints that can be tweaked, assumes week-long sprints. We call them iterations because we tend not to do commit mode the way that Scrum does, and is predicting what your commitment is based on velocity is a way to think about it. Hope that answers it. If you want to get more into XP versus Scrum, that's a great beer conversation.
Question from Bassam Zodi. Is there integration with IDEs like Eclipse and NetBeans and I think he means Visual Studio there. He says MS, which I presume is Microsoft Visual Studio.
Sure.
And he goes on.
That's a good question.
He goes on to ask. No problem. He goes on to ask, and integration with MS project planning and resource management.
I can't speak to those specific integrations. I will hand wave a bit and talk that Tracker does have an API. in fact, all this UI that I've been using today in this demonstration for you guys is using the Tracker API, the public API, for about 95%. There's some private stuff in there, as you might expect. But as far as story manipulation, all that stuff is done with the same API that you can use. As a result, there are a bunch of integrations. Some of the more common ones that people use are there's a Jira integration that somebody has, so you can actually, if you had use Jira as your ticket system, but you wanted to use Tracker as actually managing what the dev team is working on, there's some automatic linking where you can actually, it's too complex to show you here, but you can configure it so that much the way that, say, Icebox or Epic show up as a pane, you can see a pane here with your Jira stories or your Jira tickets, and you can drag them over and they get turned into, and prioritize them, they get turned into Tracker stories, and as that Tracker story finishes, the Jira ticket finishes. There's a very common one that we use as a GitHub post-commit hook, so that you can actually, say finishes number, and every story here has a unique ID. You can put that ID in your comments on your commits, and that will actually finish the story for you, so you don't have to do it manually. We've had some teams that have done things with Jenkins plugins. There's a question in the earlier broadcast about Jenkins plugins, and I think some people have written some custom things for supporting continuous deployment. Once stories were once CI builds were green with a given set of functionality. I would say there's an integrations page in the UI. Off of I think the user profile or help or something, and it tells you the ones that we know about, but I know that there's a lot out there. I can't speak specifically to any of those specific tools that you requested, though.
And last question from Amy Kinney again. Why do people who are following stories not get notified when there are changes to the tasks?
That is a great question. I don't know. Amy, do you want to hit me on Twitter, and maybe I can hook you up with one of the Tracker team? Clearly, you are a big user of tasks, and I would love for you to get that feedback directly to the dev team.
Yeah, Amy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No,
yeah, go ahead, Peter.
I was just going to say, Amy, if you hit him up on Twitter, or if you want to. I think we can. She's curious what your handle is, your Twitter handle.
Yeah, hang on. I'm getting it up there. I'm putting it up on the screen. @DWFrank is my Twitter handle. Please, anybody has any questions, feel free to harass me there. But Amy, I would love to hook you up with someone on our support team. Those are a couple of great questions that I do not have good answers for. The mentioned stuff is really early, and the following stuff is only recently come out. And that's fantastic feedback for those guys.
Excellent. Listen, Davis, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. This is kind of a first introduction for the Pivotal Labs folks here to the Spring audience. So really appreciate you being the ambassador of Labs. And just want to let everyone know that we typically publish the YouTube replays on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/SpringSourceDev. And if you want to be just immediately notified about the publication, just go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Alternatively, we usually send out an email to the registrants when that replay is ready. So that'll be available for you to share with your coworkers and your friends. So one last thing, I would love to just invite you to check out what's coming up on our webinar program. We're going to be talking about on September 26th, Phil Webb is going to be joining us to talk about Spring Boot, arguably one of the newest and hottest new projects in the Spring ecosystem. Something very, very interesting. I highly encourage you to check that out. We'll also be we'll be following after Spring 1, which is September 9th, which, by the way, if you live in California and you haven't had a chance to register, we're almost sold out. I mean, we're really close. So would recommend that you take this moment to register. And then in early October, we don't have this up on the website yet, but it'll be live very shortly. We're going to have Rawson talking about WebSockets, very popular topic. So look forward to seeing you at one of the future webinars. And thanks again for your time, your attention, and your questions. Davis, anything else you want to say before we sign off?
That's it. I moved back to the last slide. This presentation I gave today is all in HTML, and I will have it. A version is up already up on GitHub, but at this repo, there'll be instructions on how to view it if you wanted to look at the slides again.
Excellent. And we'll make sure to publish that link in the description of the YouTube video so that slides and video are all in one place. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to seeing you in the next webinar, and have a great day. Bye-bye.